we get experimental science. We're curious, non-judgmental.
All right, so folks, what are we chatting about tonight? Tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about the science of the Megalodon shark. Why are we doing this? Well, we had a Discord watch party, and so we're going to talk a little bit about why some of the science might be incorrect. We're also going to get into why scientists are not convinced even of what we think we might know about the Meg, and more. This diagram is a BOP-SCI diagram based on what we think the size is of these animals. And important to note that already there's the first error in the Meg movie. In the movie, they suggest that the Meg average size is 70 to 80 feet. So they don't have bones, they have cartilage. Cartilage can and does fossilize, so we do have the occasional jaw structure that's fossilized from Megalodon shark. How do they actually figure out the size? They back calculate. They do a proxy essentially of what the tooth size would be, for example, for a great white, and do a ratio. And then they do the same kind of calculation, an approximate ratio of how big a Meg would have to be with that kind of bite size based on the mouth and the tooth size. So that's how they kind of work backwards to that measurement. And so in the movie, already the first issue, they say it's 70, 80 feet on average. Turns out the average measurements based on what we know is about 50 to 60 feet in length. The great white shark is what people kind of use as a proxy for the behavior of the Meg, which we'll talk about why that's off in a little bit. That's about 20 feet in length. So actually the best analogy that I read was the size of the average great white is the size of the male reproductive organ of the Megalodon shark. Do we have genetic material of the Megalodon? No, we do not. So the Meg died about 2.5 million years ago. While we have sharks' teeth, DNA that you can extract from there, if any, is so degraded, you're not going to get any kind of sequencing from that. So the other idea is we can do the chicken experiment that we are trying to do with dinosaurs and chickens. Meaning, can you turn on and alter the genetic sequence in a way that you start reverting the animal to a megalodonic state, right? So that's what they're doing with chickens. They're turning on and off genes and making a chicken more, quote, dino-like. Meaning a chicken with scales, with teeth. So Cliff, when looking at the phylogenetic tree, you're trying to identify something that might be the most common ancestor or have a common lineage with the Megalodon. Now, great white shark is what is utilized as a proxy. It turns out one big issue, Cliff, is if you're trying to find a genetic relative of the Megalodon, you can look at the phylogenetic tree now and you can actually mark out and identify points of evolutionary time. And the problem is the great white is actually relatively new. It is closer related to other sharks when moving down the phylogenetic tree than you would place the Megalodon, meaning in terms of evolutionary time, it is newer. So using it as a proxy for the Meg for genetics, it wouldn't work. You couldn't turn back simply or, quote, revert some great white genes and make it more Meg-like, because there is not predicted to be a lot of overlap given the placement of where modern day sharks exist and when they evolve. So again, take this with a grain of salt, right? There's a lot of inferences here, meaning we don't fully understand what the actual genetic code is, and we'll never be able to get it because that is how paleontology works, right? You can't, especially for these animals, we can't extract anything. But given the animals we do have around today, and if we look at their genetic relatedness, it does not seem like the great white is even a good proxy for anything. And that's the big issue in a lot of the Megalodon hypotheses, is they're all based off great white behavior. But if you listen to the paleontology phylogeneticists, that's not something that they believe is even a thing. This possible scene might be correct. The reason being is you're able to actually back estimate the size of these animals based on what we think the size is from the teeth. So there's different teeth that you're able to utilize and you can find from nature. So we actually have a Megalodon tooth sample here. From that and the jaw structure, you can actually back calculate how big the animal was, and then compared to modern day animals, you can do another rough estimate as to what the size might be. And so they suspect the weight of the animal is about 105,000 pounds. This is compared to the blue whale, for example. The blue whale is 300,000 pounds. So this is about the third of the weight of a blue whale. And interestingly enough, they also, with that size calculation, the researchers have been able to suggest like how many humans, let's say like an average person, the Meg would need to eat to survive a day. Like, again, these are all estimates, but based on that weight, it would only need one. It would only need to eat one human a day to survive. Here, they suggested that the animal could actually bite into this underwater base called Mana 1, and the idea was that the teeth could hit the contact area but not break the durable glass. They've put this through a simulation where, given all the hypothetical measurements that we've made, they calculated bite force, and then they calculated the tensile strength of this durable glass to see, yes, if the glass could have bite mark put into it but not actually cracked. And the math does work out that something like this, based on all the calculations that they have, could in fact happen. Every layer of this information is all based on estimates, based on, you know, ratios, comparison to modern day animals, etc. If you take all those as yes, that those could be true, then this works out. But again, with the caveat, like you're saying, those initial measurements may or may not be accurate. And that's actually the big issue to it, like the genetic side of things, right? The genetic measurements have been suggested to be very inaccurate because what you're comparing them to is a great white, which is not phylogenetically the closest thing to compare them against. The teeth that are found today are about estimated between 20 million years old, and they're found across 6 different continents, so they were pretty widespread. They went extinct about estimated 2 million years ago, so that was correct in the at least the trailer and then the movie. One thing that was, I thought, really interesting was they were trying to identify what the temperature was at the current time. While you can't get DNA from these fossil samples, you can get isotope readings. So you can get certain molecules and actually pull them from the fossils and see what composition they are. And the oxygen isotopes that they pulled from these samples can actually give you information about temperature. And it turns out that there is higher temperatures in the body than in the surrounding environments based on these isotope readings. So this is a term called mesothermy. It is prevalent in other sharks as well, and all that means is that they have a higher body temperature than the surrounding water. So what this allows them to do is to go faster, and they can burn more energy because of this speed. That also means they have to take in an absurd amount of nutrition. So the estimated amount of nutrition that they have to take in is 98,000 kilocalories every day. So kilocalorie means you're already multiplying that by a factor of 1,000. So 98,000 kilocalories would be an even higher number that they would have to be able to eat and take in. Then two more humans. And so the suspicion of why it went extinct is multifold. One is changing temperatures. There was an ice age around the time we suspect it went extinct, so the water temperatures could have gone down. It would have been unable to keep up with those water temperatures if its food resources were depleted. And the suspicion is its food resources did get depleted because there was death of its prey because of the ice age. So those are some of the reasons why we suspect that it's actually not alive anymore. They did have a suspicion of what kind of food these animals ate, and again, that's also based on fossil evidence. So things around at the same time could have been whales, dolphins, seals. Allowing these animals probably would have been part of their diet. But again, the suspicion is that there's so much ecosystem loss due to the ice age that they were unable to keep up with that. Talk about the one final big hitter. The Meg movie suggests that the giant shark, right, that's oversized, could exist at the Marianas Trench, right, super deep. The problem is all the shark fossils that we found are located 50 to 200 feet below the surface. It is much deeper at the Marianas Trench, and so there is a suspicion that the reason they could not go so deep, which is what the movie suggested they would have to go to, they were under an ocean current, and if you cross that current, very warm there, and that's how they're able to survive because of the body temperature issue. Problem is actually having the sharks be adapted to go that deep to begin with, because the water does get cold as you're going down to the bottom of the Mariana Trench area, and them having the drive to go that deep into the ocean, even if there was a protective barrier underneath it, probably wouldn't have happened, especially given where you're finding the fossils. It's never on that deep side. It's much more shallow waters. So that's another big error on the part of the movie. What ended up happening was, with the ice age coming in, you saw a depletion of prey, and because there was a depletion of prey, animals that just didn't survive that last ice age, they became less dense, and they probably weren't unable to sustain themselves. That is the big driving hypothesis as to why the animal went extinct to begin with. Now, supposedly, there is the opportunity to extract DNA from teeth, but these teeth would have been so far degraded that you wouldn't be able to extract anything from them.